Let's play a game. What do Ludacris, Betty White, and Joe Tinker all have in common? I'll let you think about it. Time's up. The answer is 3 words. Oak Park, Illinois.
A lot of people think about history when they think of Oak Park and River Forest because we're sort of the first-in suburbs on the west side of Chicago.
That's Frank Lloyd, Executive Director of the Historical Society of Oak Park and River Forest. He knows a lot about the humble beginnings of both communities.
The village of Oak Park was incorporated in 1902. So today's Berwyn, Cicero, and Chicago's Austin neighborhood were together with Oak Park in this larger community called Cicero. And it was only when Oak Park broke off and formed its own separate village that I say 1902.
All of this happened years after Oak Park created a joint high school with River Forest in the late 1800s, which is where NBA player Iman Shumpert graduated from. Now, we're about a minute into this story, and I've already named 4 people you probably know. So who's next on this list?
So the guy who invented Twinkies lived in Oak Park and then in River Forest. Marjorie Judith Vincent graduated from Oak Park River Forest High School and she was Miss America. Edgar Rice Burroughs, the guy who wrote the Tarzan stories, and also the guy who invented Kool-Aid lived in River Forest.
Oak Park is also a place that people came after they were successful, right? And so a collective of successful people called Oak Park home, and perhaps just in their spare time they were able to pass that greatness on to their neighbors.
If you're on TikTok, you may recognize this guy. Our friendly neighborhood historian breaks down all things Chicago, and Chicago adjacent, almost every day.
Oak Park is famous for historic architect Frank Lloyd Wright, also very famous for the prolific author Ernest Hemingway, but also black scientist Percy Julian was one of the earlier residents of Oak Park during the 1950s and 1960s.
That's 3 more names, and they're arguably the biggest. Let's learn more about them.
A lot of people think of Oak Park and our sister suburb of River Forest as together being the largest concentration of Frank Lloyd Wright designed homes in the world. So there's a couple dozen Frank Lloyd Wright structures designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in his time here, roughly between 1889 and 1909, about a 20-year period. Ernest Hemingway, he was born in Oak Park in 1899. He graduated from the high school, from Oak Park River Forest High School, and then went off, became a newspaper reporter and a journalist and eventually a novelist. Dr. Percy Julian moved here in the 1950s. He was a scientist, PhD scientist, and he was really a fighter for all kinds of chemical breakthroughs and came up with compounds that helped with people with glaucoma, helped actually with the development of the birth control pill, and also helped in terms of rheumatoid arthritis. He moved here at a time when Oak Park had a very small number of African-American residents, and he's an African-American scientist, and his house was attacked twice when he moved in.
Like most U.S. cities, Oak Park had its challenges when it came to diversifying neighborhoods.
There was a famous African-American church here, Mount Carmel Colored Baptist Church, which sadly burned down in the 1930s. It was under suspicious circumstances that the church burned down. And then all of a sudden a business district is raised where that church formerly was.
There was an incident where the local symphony orchestra didn't have any black performers. And there was a young woman who wanted to kind of just practice with the symphony. And one of the leaders of the symphony said, "Oh, we're not really ready for a black violinist." And so it shocked the conductor, who said, "I'm going to resign, but first she's going to play a concert." Because of that incident, the village of Oak Park formed a Human Relations Commission.
That commission started looking more seriously at housing and the racial inequalities that came with it, and started to implement tangible changes, so much so that the community is now 18% black. Compare that to the couple of dozen of black families that were there just 60 years ago.
I think it's very important for us all to remember that it actually happened, right? There's things that happen in our history that we're very proud of, and there's things that happen in our history that unfortunately we're ashamed of. But you can't heal anything that you're not willing to discuss.
It's like you don't learn history to live in the past. You don't learn history to go back and try to make something the way it used to be. You learn history to get sort of a grounding and sort of an orientation and a way to sort of understand some of the places you've been.
And with that understanding, communities are able to grow and influence the next wave of Dr. Bernard Fantas's. Grace Wilbur Trouts, and Richard Sears. Yeah, that Sears.